I have HubSpot CRM. I have my tasks. I follow up with everyone individually. Is it scalable? No. Does it take me a lot of time? Yes. But this is our moment to be like very close and connected with our customers. And I don't want to over automate anything right now. I think we're getting close to the point where we're going to have to, but I love one-on-one conversation right now.
Welcome to this week's episode of Zero to a Million, brought to you by Unstack. I'm your host, Zach Rego, and today I'm joined by CEO and co-founder of Wonderment, Jess Maher. We are going to dig into a couple really important topics to our audience. One is pre-launch strategy. So Jess is going to give us a little bit of background on her career, but she's an incredible marketer with a lot of great experiences and is now building a business from pre-launch to now live. So Jess, thank you for joining us and sharing all of your infinite wisdom with us.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you some experience. I can't say it's all wisdom, but take that with a grain of salt.
There are wins and losses in those experiences, and you've learned from them, so we can hopefully learn from them as well. So yeah. I'd love to dig into kind of getting your start in marketing. You've had a pretty awesome career in marketing in particular.
Sure. I'm happy to give you the nutshell background version. So I thought I was going to be a zoologist. Honestly, I kind of got into marketing by accident. Well, actually, so I went to school originally for advertising. At first, I went to school for art. Then I'm like, I can't do much with an art degree, so I'm going to go to school for business. Ended up graduating in advertising. Thought I was going to be a fancy ad exec, creating wonderful slogans with pretty baby pictures on them. But once I graduated from college, I'm like, oh shit, I need a job. Ended up stumbling into a startup that was a SaaS company, and I had no idea what SaaS was or the cloud was or anything. I was employee number 7, the first marketer on the team, my first marketing job, and this was 2006, 2007-ish. And at the time, I learned on the job. I got my hands dirty, writing content, learning about SEO, like doing email marketing for the first time. Working at a startup gave me the opportunity to be a jack of all trades in marketing and run events and do a million different things. And not only marketing, but sales too, right? Because as a small company, I was talking to customers a lot and doing demos. And even there was a time where I was using our API to integrate our software with their website. I'm like, I don't know what an API is, but somebody teach me and I'll do it. And ever since then, I've been in marketing for high growth SaaS companies ever since.
So it's funny you say that. I just spoke with a potential intern from BC earlier today, and she asked me, like, hey, any advice you have for me and my internship search or my first job? She's a senior. And I told her, I was like, hey, like, you're going to want to get involved with the startup. Like, you're taking the right approach looking at companies that are startups, because you're going to get a ton of experience in a ton of different areas, and you're going to find out really quick, like, what do you love? Where do you want to learn more? And what do you want to kind of avoid? Because there's so much to marketing. Early in your career, where did you kind of latch on to? These are the few things I really loved in marketing that I wanted to double down on and really advance my career within.
Yeah, well, growing up with an art background, I thought my passion and my superpower was going to be more on the creative side. And I loved it. Like I loved building things in Photoshop and doing a lot of web design. And I actually started my first web design company when I was in high school. So it's something that I really loved. But once I took my first job as a marketer for a SaaS company, and I needed to learn more about, ranking in Google and Google Analytics, I got really obsessed with the analytical side and how that would marry the creative side. So I think just because of the business, I learned a lot on demand generation and on inbound marketing and content creation and how to be discovered organically on the internet. Because as a startup, we had no money to spend on advertising. So I needed to figure out how to generate customers essentially for nothing. And that's something that I loved and I learned how to do.
So after your time in the startup world, you transitioned to HubSpot as a marketing manager?
I did. So I actually applied to HubSpot in 2008 and I got rejected.
Nice.
But
kept the receipts.
HubSpot was great because they were always very public about what kind of marketers and what kind of people they like to hire. And the reason that I was so and love with HubSpot is because they were at the forefront of marketing, right? They were like the go-to experts for marketing at the time. And so I just became a sponge of absorbing everything that they were creating and publishing and working on. And I learned the HubSpot ways, even not having worked there. And about a year and a half later, I remember I was actually working at a different company. I updated my resume with some of my accomplishments, because one of the pieces of feedback that I heard from Mike Volpe, who was the VP of marketing at the time at HubSpot, he said that one of the biggest mistakes marketers have on their resume is the only numbers on their resume is their phone number. They don't actually put any type of quantifiable results of not only what they did, but what they accomplished. And I remember I updated my LinkedIn to reflect that, since LinkedIn is now the new resume. And a week later, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to chat? Oh, and by the way, do you want to work here?" And I'm like, trying to keep my cool. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, maybe, sure, yes." So I just learned a ton. I learned a ton from them, and I put all of that into practice to better myself and to better my skill set, and to also making sure that I get better at articulating and communicating my accomplishments as well.
Yeah. It is shocking how I put a LinkedIn post about this a couple months ago when we started our search for our new marketing hire that we're still searching for. Amazing how few marketers have stats on their resume. I come from a sales leadership background, and I interviewed a ton of sales reps, and you kind of, in the sales side of things, you're always looking for like percentage to quota achievement, like where did you rank on the team, things of that nature on resumes. And I thought it would translate similarly to marketing, and surprised to see that it's not as prevalent as you would expect. And the ones that do have it are, that stands out in the crowd. So that was good feedback from Mike, and certainly
Yeah.
something marketers can still work on today.
Yeah, super appreciative that he was very transparent about that. And it reminds me of one of my favorite questions to ask marketers during an interview is when we talk about their projects or their campaigns that they've worked on, and they say it's successful. I say, well, how do you define success? And surprisingly, it's surprising how many of them don't actually bring in, well, we were generating X and then now we have Y. It's just more of, oh, it's a success because I got it done. And I'm like, okay, not terrible, but yeah, I think being able to measure the before and after of your work is super important.
So you progressed through and up the rankings at HubSpot, to a point where you're leading I assume a pretty large team, and then you decide to leave and go to another startup that kind of blows up in the Boston area with InVision. How was that transition? And obviously now you're leaving marketing to marketers, which I think is fun and something I have always been like really excited about. To marketing to designers, product marketers, is that kind of a little bit of a different spin on where you were going there?
Different audience. So designers, product designers, the marketers were also a sub persona of InVision, but yes, very different. And it was actually one of the hardest decisions was to leave HubSpot, because it's a great company, great people, but also being a marketer, marketing software to marketers.
Yeah.
It's super fun. It's super fun. And
Yeah,
you know this.
it is.
One of the reasons that I wanted to take on a new challenge is because I love startups. I love early stage startups. I had been with HubSpot from just under 200 employees to 1,000 employees and past the IPO. And I wanted to do something earlier stage again and just be a part of that rocket ship. Because of my background in design was one of my other passions. And there were very, very, very few companies I would have left HubSpot for. And so if I was going to leave HubSpot, it was going to be at a company that had a mission that I also cared about, in a space that I cared about, with a product I cared about, and then a product that I still used myself. And as a marketer and as a designer, I was also a customer of InVision, and I loved the product. I loved the company. And so, I took the leap and tried something new. And let me tell you, it was a learning experience to have to learn how to market to a completely different audience. And I have done that before, but I think when you get so used to marketing to yourself for so long that you have to take a step back and say, okay, for this other market, what do they really care about? What is their language? How do they make decisions? because you can go into it with assumptions, but you really need to, be reflective on what's most important. And, that's one of the reasons I took the job, is because I just wanted to do something totally new.
Yeah, it's super challenging to, I think back to my experience at WordStream, like I felt like I knew that product inside and out, and it was easy for me when I took the GM role to start marketing it. And then when I came here, it's like I had to take a few months to literally talk to customers, demo them, and try to understand. We were talking earlier about demoing, but had to listen, right, and put my marketing ears on to hear what features were working with the market, what were people like resonating. So it's so hard to change, even though you kind of still were the persona you were marketing to at Envision. Just I think you get a lot of comfort in being with a company for a long time.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, there's good things about that. If you're with, so when we were talking earlier about the benefits of joining a startup, especially as somebody earlier in their career, it allows you to get a lot of experience. But the one thing that I really appreciated about my time at HubSpot is it gave me the experience and the perspective of what a really great company looks like, and how a company like that executes, how they, their vision, like how do they just make the magic happen. And so even if you're younger in your career, there are benefits to working at a startup, absolutely, but there are also other amazing benefits about joining a amazing fast growing company, because you get to see not only your own department, but like how do they do sales, how do they do product, how do they do partnerships, and you also get a lot more breadth of experience that way. So I always recommend to folks that either join an early stage company or try to land yourself in an amazing company, either way, so that you can get that perspective from both sides.
And how big was Envision when you joined? How
About
many
150
employees?
employees.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So,
fully remote too, which is the other reason
oh,
that I
really?
was, yeah, totally 100% remote. Like Envision was so early to the remote
Yeah.
working. Now it's like everyone's doing it, obviously. But yeah, they 150 employees. I think they grew to like 800 employees. And learning. It was the first time I've ever hired a team fully remote, not having ever met them. So that was a fun learning experience. And yeah, I mean, the culture is totally different, and the way we operate is totally different being a remote company. But I think that's also what's prepared me to run Wonderment remotely today, is because of that experience.
So yeah, I love to transition to Wonderment. I think that's interesting. Are you planning on having the team be fully remote, regardless of geography? And was your experience at Envision like we're good to go on this front?
Plan to and force to are two totally different things.
Correct. Correct.
I have always been a fan of remote work, and I always believed that's where the future of work was going. I personally am a hybrid worker, so I love to work from home a few days from a week, and then in the office a couple days a week. Not having that in-person meeting at all is something that I learned at my time at Envision, that I still valued, and that I still wanted to see people like on occasion. Um, so I think what we're going to do is we're not going to do like the formal office thing, but we want to have a place where we, at some point when it's safe to do so, where we can meet in person and collaborate and find ways to work together in person and get to know each other in person and hang out and do non-work things. And once we're ready to do so, like we're going to do more of that, hopefully this summer.
Yeah. No. I feel exactly the same way. I love working from home. Need that time in the office to honestly. I miss just shooting the shit with people at their desk and not like
I
not
know.
working. This like getting up and being like I got to get away and just talk to somebody.
Yes, please. And one of the things that really excited me about starting a company is the opportunity to shape the culture and create the culture and the company of our dreams. And part of that required an in office or in person experience where I can go in and talk to every single employee every day, or surprise them with gifts, or just, have water cooler conversation to share innovative ideas. And now that we're forced to be 100% remote, and it kind of forces you to figure out new ways to build team bonding, and to making sure that we are not just doing our work every day, but that we are pushing ourselves beyond what we think is possible, and that we share ideas, and that knowledge transfer happens organically. And it just all these things that I didn't expect to have to think about, we have to think about at this stage.
Yeah. So I'd love to dig in and give our audience a little bit of an understanding of the genesis for Wonderment, like why this product in this industry, and a little bit of the background on the company that you co-founded. I guess, geez, coming up on 2 years now.
Yeah, well, okay. So here's the history. I'll give context in terms of what Wonderment is. So we are a order tracking and shipping communication platform for e-commerce companies to help them create better post-purchase experiences. When I decided I wanted to start a company in e-commerce, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. So I spent 6 months doing research and diving deep into a bunch of different areas. And I actually almost started a product in building a consumer app, which is not my background at all. Like, I'm a B2B person. If I was an engineer, I probably would have built something. But because I'm not an engineer, I needed to make sure I did my homework and my validation about the problem that I wanted to go solve and what I wanted to go build, because it's an investment for me to do so. Over the few months of research, I reconnected with my now co-founder, Brian, who I used to work with at Hubspot almost 10 years ago. He was at Klaviyo for a number of years. And if nobody's heard of Klaviyo, super hot, fast growing company in Boston in e-commerce. So he's very well familiar with the space. We both wanted to start a company in e-commerce, and we're like, we should do this together. So we spent a lot of time talking with brands and e-commerce companies to figure out, like, what are their challenges? What's keeping them up at night? We were also doing a lot of research in terms of the macro trends and even the micro trends that were happening in e-commerce and seeing where things were going. And we started to actually build a different kind of product, more around helping brands increase their average order value on their websites. But because of COVID, what was happening was shipping and supply chain was really breaking down, and it was destroying the reputation for these small companies. And we're talking to them, and they're almost in tears to say, I received a ton of bad reviews because the product was delivered late. And that's totally out of their control. And what we discovered is that these companies don't have good visibility into which of their orders are running late, where they are in the world, how can they handle that with customers. And we're like, well, we should go build that. It doesn't really exist. There are tooling on the high-end enterprise side. So if you think about large retailers, Amazons, Walmarts, a lot of them have this technology or they've custom built it, but that technology is not accessible to small brands. And so we saw that as an opening and an opportunity and more of a blue ocean. But we were very, very specific about solving this one problem that seems it's a big problem, but it's very focused. Instead of saying we want to build like a million features out of the gate, let's just build this one thing, try to ship it in like 2 to 3 weeks, get it in customers' hands, and get feedback. So we've been very iterative and very agile about our product development. But at the end of the day, we built this company because we wanted to solve a very painful problem and helping brands be able to compete with some of the big retailers in the industry and be able to deliver really positive experiences for their customers.
So when you're interviewing customers to identify a problem, is your ICP today similar to the initial audience you were interviewing, or
it's the same? It's the same.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yes.
awesome. And is that a brand? Is it an e-commerce store that sells a variety of brands? Is it a Shopify drop shipper? Is it somewhere all of the above? Like, I'd be interested to hear where you've kind of found that focus.
Yeah, so we are a Shopify native app. So we're only selling our product to companies that host their stores on Shopify right now. At some point, we'll be multi-platform. But the company, our ideal customer that we're talking to right now is a medium-sized company. So I wouldn't say they're like small mom and pop shops. They're typically already established. They're typically doing tens of thousands to $100,000 in sales per month. Most of them are in the millions mark. The difference with these companies is they are growing. And so they're growth stage companies that care very heavily on CX. They are very driven to say, I know that customer experience and retention is going to be a differentiator for my brand. And now it's time for me to start focusing on this and get serious about it. So those are our ideal customers right now. And we see a lot more e-commerce companies in the space really starting to prioritize retention, because I think the past 10 years, it's really been all about acquisition and all about conversion. Now it's all about LTV and profit and how do I keep my customers for the long term. And so we're starting to see that macro trend happening, which is why we focus on one specific area of that. And then we'll grow more into the, providing more products and features over time.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think it's I haven't really thought about it like this, but acquisition at this point has become so expensive for every product, right? That they're probably breaking even or sometimes even losing money on the first transaction. So the subsequent transactions of acquiring a customer is where the money's really made. So you have a huge opportunity to kind of own that, right? Like I think if any of these business owners are looking at their marketing CAC, it's probably pretty high compared to their average order value.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly right. And if
yeah,
it's another reason why you'll notice this. Most products that are sold on the internet, not necessarily on marketplaces, but with direct-to-consumer stores, most products are on average at least $25 to $30, because if it's anything less than that, they'll lose money. So that's kind of like the tier. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's actually why we originally were building a product around helping brands generate more revenue up front, is to make up for that loss on the acquisition side. But we decided to shift gears and say, hey, there's actually a different way to solve this. But yeah, acquisition costs have been skyrocketing for sure.
and I'd love to learn a little bit about your acquisition strategy. I mentioned this to you prior, but your site and the way you framed the product and had a blog with content and had a podcast page and had content and positioning before the product was even, like, just to get people to kind of join your wait list was, to me, kind of the gold standard. There's two clients of ours that I think did a really good job, and you're one of them. Why did you do that? And, I think a lot of founders avoid doing that, and they're like, oh, let's just get something up that we can try to capture emails on. And what were the results? Like, how successful was it to start to build the brand and the brand awareness around your content before actually shipping the product and getting into people's hands?
Yeah. As a HubSpotter, content and inbound marketing is in my blood. So I know how important that is to do early. And one of the biggest mistakes that founders make and that startups do is that they don't do marketing in advance of their product. So one of the things that I remember HubSpot did in the early days, even before I joined, is they built this free web app called Marketing or Website Grader. If you probably seen Website Grader, they actually built that before the product was available. So they built that and they built their blog, and they did a ton of content marketing, and they used that content and that offer to generate enough demand and then good email list, so that when they launched the initial product of HubSpot, they already had a really good email list of people to promote it to. I think creating a waiting list sign up page is fine, and that's a good start. But there's so much more you can do to start to generate demand even before the product is ready. We were actually generating a lot of demand before we even had a website, just by talking to people and starting to get referrals. And then when we launched the website, we actually had not a lot of product information yet, because the product was still being built and it was so new that we're like, we don't even know what features are going to be in it yet. But we knew what we stood for, and we knew what the problem we were trying to solve. So we just started to create a ton of content around that. We started to create a ton of educational content around shipping delays and how do you communicate shipping delays to customers, showing them examples, use cases, etc. And actually, from an SEO perspective, we don't rank very well on a lot of things right now because we're so new, but we rank at position 3 for shipping delays, which is super impressive at our size and our stage. And that was because we're really focused on one particular area. So that's one piece of advice I have for startups who are launching something for the first time, is it can get very overwhelming to think about all this content you need to create and all these pages you need to create, but just start with one focused thing. It'll make your life so much easier.
Yeah. So obviously you focused on shipping delays. What was you kind of knew that was going to be the core product. Obviously there's a ton of search volume. I think over the last 6 months, I'm literally dealing with a shipping delay today as we speak. That's very frustrating to me.
Oh, tell me who you bought from and I'll try and sell them.
It's Amazon. But
Oh, okay. Oh, no, actually, no,
yeah,
that's a real problem with them. We're actually
it's
getting a lot of requests from merchants who sell on Amazon for us too.
there you go. I
Yeah,
think that's smart. Like it's so frustrating because they just keep telling me, "Oh, you can cancel this tomorrow if it's not there yet." It's like, all
yeah,
right, you said that starting on Monday and now it's Thursday. I should be able to.
yeah.
Neither here nor there.
They used to be the gold standard for that kind of experience, but now I think they've missed the beat on that, and there's so many better experiences you can do, and so being able to
Yeah,
innovate that is like a huge opportunity.
yeah, I love that, and I think you've tried to own that. Obviously, that was the problem you were solving, and I try to encourage all of our prospects or customers to do the same. Like, how do you develop content? How do you get some consistency around it with everything else going on? How did you kind of staff up that content creation?
Embrace the inconsistency because as a startup founder, it's like really hard to do. I'm just gonna say. Um, I was fortunate that we were able to hire a content freelancer to help us out. She was really amazing in terms of working with me, but it was still my responsibility to making sure that I still publish on a regular basis. So I set a cadence where I said I want us to at least publish something twice a week. And to do that even at our stage is really hard. So she helped us out. Like there were some weeks where we kind of, we exchanged, but uh, I just knew how important it was to start publishing a lot early, because the earlier you do it, the better in the long run. It's something that compounds over time. It takes time to build up your organic rankings. It just takes, time to start to generate traffic. And I knew if I just kept pushing it off, that meant slower growth in the long term. And we want to be at a point where at the end of the year, we have much more of a flywheel that's happening. And we know that pre-work is going to have to happen earlier in the year for that to happen.
And then you obviously found your niche, found your ICP, validated the product, built the product. How did you test messaging like shipping delays versus communicating order delays? Like I don't know. There's a lot there that happens post transaction for an e-commerce site. What was the testing that you've kind of built out to identify what you're messaging in and the real problem you're trying to solve?
We tested by just publishing stuff. Honestly, I wouldn't say there was a whole lot of experimentation. We're now at the point where we're A/B testing different positioning and different ways to describe the product. Now that we have more traffic, because it's really hard to test anything if you don't have a lot of like a good base of traffic to begin with, or else your tests are not going to be scientifically significant. It was just really as simple as let's just try to be helpful and let's create the content that we know people are looking for, right? So give you some examples is 7 examples of how to communicate shipping delays right after a purchase or things like that. I mean, it's literally black and white. We weren't trying to be over creative. We were just trying to be very clear and helpful.
Question for you. This is more me trying to understand the market. I'm sure you have some insight in this. Is there a best way to communicate a shipping delay? Like device wise? Is it email? Is it text? Is it like have you guys done any insight into that? Because I'm really interested in how people are willing to take on like communicating that to their clients.
Yeah, I think it's a case by case and a brand by brand. However, we've gotten feedback from our customers that um, email is great. Email is kind of like if you're not going to do anything over SMS, definitely do it by email. But you probably don't need both because that could be overkill. If a consumer subscribes to updates via SMS, then it's a good reason to like send an update via SMS. Or if you're the type of brand where your customers are primarily text driven instead of email driven, that's why I say it depends on the brand because it depends on their customers too.
Okay, interesting. And when you generate this wait list, you've generated demand. You're about to go live. I'm bringing you back a little bit now, but what was your strategy to keep that email list engaged? Because I think there is some level of like momentum that happens, right? They come, they read some great piece of content, they sign up, and then if there is this just no communication for a while, I think that you probably lose a little bit of momentum. So what was your cadence to keep them engaged? And then, when the product did go live, what was the strategy to acquire them as paying customers?
Yeah, so believe it or not, we have not really done much of any email marketing.
Okay.
All of our outreach is one-to-one
Love it.
right now. So
Grassroots.
I have HubSpot CRM. I have my tasks. I follow up with everyone individually. Is it scalable? No. Does it take me a lot of time? Yes. But this is our moment to be like very close and connected with our customers. And I don't want to over automate anything right now. I think we're getting close to the point where we're going to have to, but I love one-on-one conversation right now.
Okay. That's amazing.
Mhm.
We're doing something very similar. And I think
Yes.
we need to start thinking about automating as well, because it is challenging.
Yeah, and now we're at like our list size is big enough, and we're at enough customers that I'm already starting to think about. Okay, now we're close to doing some like email marketing and some regular update, because I think the customer expects it too. Like the customer would like to make sure that they hear from us. They're getting all the announcements on products and things like that, and we're doing that. But it's not super consistent right now.
Last question. We ask every founder, 2 books you recommend founders read while they're either building their business or about to launch a business. Fiction, nonfiction. We've had a couple nonfiction ones or fictional books that were interesting recommendations.
So I love reading novels, but they're all like beach trash. So I wouldn't recommend any of them.
What? Time out. We'll create a new category in our blog post. And we've got a best startup books. It actually ranks very well on Google. Give me some beach trash. We'll create a whole new category. It can just be.
Oh my God. I mean, I just like, this is terrible. I just like look at the top novels and like whatever has the most reviews. And if it looks completely mindless, I will read it on the beach. And,
Okay.
So I love that. Okay. In terms of really helpful business books, there's 2 that I recommend. One is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. There are so many leadership books out there, but that one gives you like in the trenches, real life, very painful to read perspective from a CEO. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I can't remember the name of the book by April Dunford. It's a product positioning book.
Yeah, I just listened to her on a podcast.
Yes.
She's outstanding. I'll let me look it up real quick so we can plug it in here.
Yeah. I'm terrible about
obviously awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll give you a third too, because I don't like to follow the rules. I love Play Bigger, and I forget the name of the author, but it's about category creation. I would not recommend every company to build their own category, but if it's something you are thinking about, you should read this book.
All right. So since you brought that up, we only have 5 more minutes. We can't get into how you create a category. Talk a little bit about that. Like that is super challenging. And I think Play Bigger does a good job of putting it into a book and ideas for doing it. What was like really successful for you if you had one takeaway from your time at HubSpot of like, here's how they did it, and here's how they lived it and breathed it every day?
I have some feedback and some from my experience. However, I will say the thing that I took away from HubSpot is that what they did well and the advice I have from that is not applicable to every company. So I think the mistake a lot of companies made, especially in Boston, is they saw what HubSpot was doing and say, oh, I just need to create a category and I'm good. Like, Ray, I have my own market. Creating a category does not mean creating a new term of something, right? I think there's a reason to doing it. There are many successful companies I've spoken with that haven't created a category. Klaviyo might be one of them, right? So they're also in the marketing tech, $100 million company. Do it for the right reasons and making sure that you do your homework on it, like reading this book. It could be really powerful, but there's different ways to do it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm trying not to say like, oh, you need to do this because it's
yeah.
No,
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and just so you know, if you create a category, like it's going to be hard for you to get any what like the Gartners of the world involved. So if you sell to super enterprise and you're like working with those analysts, just be mindful that your category creation is going to cause a new challenge for you. So I'll just say that
you don't fit in one of the matrix that they live in.
Correct.
Awesome. Jess, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. Awesome to dig into your story a little bit. Where can everyone find you and Wonderment?
Yep, wonderment.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jessica Mayer, and that's that's where you find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.